Is that word? I'm going to shut that off for now, though, because we don't really need it right at the moment. It's in progress. So I am welcoming everyone, especially people who are here on such a beautiful day. This is the perfect day for exercise and activities for life, but I'm really happy that you're able to join us. I have my usual introductory remarks, so bear with me while I go through that. I'm Sue Edkind from EastmanCARES, our education committee. We're the ones who sponsor these monthly lunch and learns. And two things I always mention from EastmanCARES, if people don't know about them, is that we do have a local community resource guide. It's updated every year at least, and there are all kinds of really good, information in here, especially for people who are new, who might not know where resources are available. It is available via, you can pick a copy up at South Cove. It's also on the website. So I encourage you, if you don't have one of these, to get one. The other thing that we have is our EastmanCARES Connection. And basically that's an opportunity for anyone who needs to talk to someone. And it just could be about anything really, but it's something that we have volunteers who are offered to do daily, weekly, monthly. If it's you or if it's somebody who needs a check-in now and then, all those things are available. And you can do that by emailing us at eastmancares@eastmannh.org, and someone will get back to you. So we strongly encourage, if anybody needs a connection, that it is available to you. For those of you who haven't done the webinar format, this is what we are doing this time. And it's kind of too bad in many respects, because this is the one talk which probably could have been done so much better in person. I appreciate the fact that Billy was willing to be flexible and try to do this as a presentation. My hope is that, maybe in the next year or so, we can, when things hopefully are better, we can get Billy to come back and do something in person with us. And I think that would be great. But he has tried to come up to the challenge here of trying to do this via Zoom. So we really appreciate that. That being said, as I mentioned before, you don't have audio, at least as a participant. We do encourage, though, questions via using the Q&A format. You're not seen. I can't see you. So that's another part of how we've been handling these. But please use the Q&A format. And the other thing is, when we're doing these in person, we can pass out evaluations and do a little something more with getting feedback from people. It's really hard to do it via Zoom, but we do encourage people to give us evaluation and feedback, suggestions for speakers, whatever, via the same route, eastmancares@eastmannh.org. We are being recorded, and it will be available. Lori makes these available to all of us via our new website. So if you know someone who missed it and would like to see any of them, actually, they're all online at the Eastman website. Our next speaker, excuse me, who is in June, is Melissa Grenier. She's the regional manager for the Alzheimer's Association in the Mass New Hampshire chapter. She'll be talking to us about the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's. She's also going to bring with her, I think, a volunteer from Hanover to talk about that person's experience with caregiving for someone with Alzheimer's. So I think that's really going to be something to look forward to. I am really hoping that we're going to be in person or try hybrid again. But we will be posting that within the next week or two. So with all that being said, I finally get to today. And to our speaker, Billy Cioffredi. Billy Cioffredi is a PT. He's founder of Cioffredi and Associates. He's a physical therapist. He's a health coach. He's been practicing for over 40 years in the Upper Valley. In 1985, he founded Cioffredi Associates Physical Therapy in Lebanon. And as many of us know, We have a clinic here in Grantham that opened in 2018 to serve our area. And as I had said before, both Paul and I have been patients there, and it's a wonderful place if you need to go for therapy or many other things that they actually offer. Billy holds expertise in treating all manner of musculoskeletal conditions from the spine to the extremities throughout the lifespan, utilizing a wide variety of approaches, including trigger point dry needling, manual therapy, and the cutting edge neurobiologic electrical stimulation, or NEWBI, I guess it's called. So with all that, I am very pleased to welcome Billy Cioffredi to our EastmanCARES Lunch and Learn. And it's all yours.
Sue, thank you so much, you and Paul. It's a delight to be here. When you had asked me, it was last year sometime, about speaking on this topic, I'd be very happy to do so, and I am. So as you notice in our the picture you have in front of you, the tagline I created, "Movement for Life," is I created that because I believe it. And so our topic here today is heartfelt and really important to me. It's the basis of everything that we look to do here. So this is a photo here. It's probably 3 or 4 years old now. This is the top of Mount Cardigan, and that's one of our 3 daughters. That's Tess, who one of 2 daughters getting married this year. And it's one of my favorite activities to do. And interestingly, it was something that I had an injury a year ago, and I just got back up hiking it again a couple of weeks ago. So I'm back to doing one of the things I really love to do, but it was through a process that was lengthy, but really important to me. I just want to say how much we enjoy being in Grantham. We have our satellite clinic there, and the Grantham and Eastman community is very welcoming for us. We just really appreciate the folks there. They seem to appreciate our presence, and it's really been very enjoyable for us to be down there. So as we look forward on this piece, Movement for Life is the important fundamental process of maintaining our health. So when we think about movement, thinking about all the different tissues in the body, so really movement is the thing that provides the nutrition for the tissues for fluid exchange, and that's fundamental to our health. So the kind of things that are important with all these movements and activities, joint health is one. So when we think about somebody who might be wanting to run a long distance race, the loading of the bones in our joints are part of what keep them healthy. Flexibility is the idea of maintaining the length of our muscles and the length of our connective tissues. And so maintaining the length of those things is another fundamental part of movement. Then muscle strength is another aspect of maintaining the strength of our muscles, the bones and our ligaments. So again, movement is what keeps the bones dense. If you know anything about osteoporosis and what we do to try to address that, it is loading. So it's loading the tissue. Same thing with ligaments. That movement is essential for these things to be healthy. Our balance and coordination, same thing. So I am turning 65 this year, so I don't know what the age range is for the people that are watching and going to be looking at the seminar, but it's common for us to see folks that as they get older, that their balance and coordination is off. Well, that is something that's a use it or lose it thing like anything else. So movement is just fundamental to maintaining what we have. And if we're not doing that, then we start to lose it. And on the psycho-emotional level, one thing that we do know with people's mental well-being is that exercise consistently is one of those pieces that demonstrates a an impact, a positive impact for people with maintaining our psycho-emotional health. So many reasons why movement is life for us. So the interesting situation with all of this is that over time, there is just a natural degradation of our muscle strength. And so while this is not necessarily to scale, and if the bottom equaled like 20-year increments across the bottom and across our lifetime, after age 30 or so, we're losing muscle strength and muscle mass a little bit as we go, just because of normal aging. And then that tends to speed up a little bit once the age of 70 is hit as well. So after the age of 60, power also decreases a little bit more rapidly at the rate of 3 to 5% annually. So power is the ability to move an effort through space, over a certain period of time. So we think of things that are very dynamic, like golf and tennis, as requiring power, as well as certainly lifting things. If you're talking about lifting items that we're doing when we're working around the house and doing gardening or landscaping and things like that, takes power. So that's another element that we tends to drop off naturally. So the challenges are that, one, if we're living a relatively sedentary lifestyle, then we're not even necessarily maintaining that level that is what we would have just by losing things a little bit over time because of our age. So we can be at a lower level simply because of not using and not moving this stuff that we have. But the other element that is common to us all, we have illnesses and we have injuries, and that's me included, with an injury to my knee. And then I got Lyme's disease last year that hit me very hard. And so there was a number of months where I was actually not doing the kind of things that were typical for me. So that red line just gives you an indication where things can really drop off on our physiology, our strength, our flexibility, our cardiovascular condition, any of those things, if we have to back down because of an injury or illness. And then the consideration is whether or not we restore that back to our previous level that we were at before the injury or before the illness, that gets us back up to par, back up to our optimal. Or if not, the graph demonstrates a level where someone really fell down and then they regained some, but not really all of what they had lost because of just the illness or the injury. And then if you have some successive elements of those across a lifetime, then your capacity might be much lower than what it could be because of those things. So it's really being mindful that in order to get ourselves back to where we were, it takes probably a lot more attention on things than just the, hey, I'm going to continue to live my lifestyle the way that I've been. So that is the good news, is that we really have capacity to bounce back up and restore what we've lost. In fact, what we do know with research is that older people, and for me, the term older continues to mean somebody else who's older than I am. People in their older years actually have had tremendous capacity to be stronger and more fit than they often were. So the study showed that just many people did not exercise or use their bodies as much as they had the capacity for. So building things up, many of us have a lot more capacity than we've been using. So what are some of the recommendations and what's kind of needed about this? So anything that gets the body moving is physical activity. So it doesn't have to be a sport, and it doesn't have to be going to the gym. It can be the work around the house or whatever it is that you might enjoy doing. So guidelines from for all Americans each week, 2 to 3 times a week, 150 minutes total. So that's 2.5 hours of moderate intensity of physical activity. So I'll talk to you about what that supposedly represents, so moderate physical intensity. And then in addition, 2 days of muscle strengthening activity. So, I personally am not somebody who wants to sign up and go to the gym all the time. And yet, I've found a need myself personally that I have to do something specifically to strengthen some muscles in some parts of my body that if I don't do that, I'm not going to recover some of what I'd lost. But those are 2 different elements of the moderate intensity compared to the strengthening things. So what's needed is loading the tissue in order to, it's the adequate stimulus is what creates a response that gets us stronger. So the term on the slide is overload, and I might modify that to say load itself. To adequate loading is what's needed in order to gain some more strength or response to our bodies. So 60% or more of the maximum available is needed to stimulate that. So if we're doing something that's less than that, it doesn't mean that there's no benefit from it. But when we think about really getting stronger or really trying to develop what it is that allows us to have our optimal, we need to push ourselves in order to do that. So this is a chart that's kind of side by side, but would be normally stacked. The one on the left would be on the top, and the one on the right would be on the bottom. So when you talk about the amount of effort it takes in order to hit that 60% or greater mark, there is some easy ways to tell if we're pushing ourselves adequately enough to get that 60% mark or not. So on the left-hand side, you see the perceived effort where it goes down to 60%. It says perceived workload might be fairly light, steady pace, not breathless. So when we're thinking about walking, for example, walking or possibly jogging, that's kind of what you might be experiencing. As we get to the moderately hard with a 70-75%, walking briskly, able to carry on a conversation, and then the piece to the right as it talks about how you can't really, you have to take some breaths in between some of your talking because the intensity is really working its way up. So there is something that's kind of an easy measure called the talk test that helps us to get a sense about that. So rule of thumb, a person doing moderate intensity aerobic activity can talk, but they can't sing, although I'm not sure how many people will be singing as they go, although maybe my wife does when she's out for a walk with her friends. A person doing vigorous intensity cannot say more than a few words without pausing for a breath. So there you go. If it feels like it's no stress at all, then you're not pushing yourself at a level where you're at 60% or more. All right, so how to do some of this. Probably a helpful element to understand is that there's this principle called the SAID principle, which is specific adaptation to imposed demands. And it means that our bodies will develop and respond as it relates to kind of the specific way that we're using it, and whether it's activities or whether it's exercise. And I might think about this applying particularly when we think about activities like golf or tennis, because they are very dynamic movements and they end up requiring a rapid acceleration of different parts of our body and highly coordinated movements. So when we think about the interest to play golf, and since we don't live in a place where you can play golf all year round very easily up here, then it's a matter of our bodies being prepared for some dynamic movement that happens. So in particular, I'm thinking of this as it relates to specific kind of activities that are going to benefit from really a kind of pre-season, if you will, time to get our bodies prepared for some of those activities, if those are the things that we really would like to do. So very basically, if we think about the physiological limits of each of us, if it's kind of we have a circle here, and at the edge of the circle is the edge of our limits. These limits are dynamic. If we are sedentary or get ill, then that circle is going to become smaller and shrink. But it can become bigger as well. And it's the thing about when we push ourselves near the edge of these limits of what we have, that's the stimulus that really creates the body's adaptive process. So we cause an increase in change in the tissues, whether it's the bones, ligaments, muscles, heart, and lungs, by stressing them on a gradient that they can tolerate. So each of us, our capacities and our limits vary depending on our own baseline fitness level that we are for today, or whichever day you're looking at it. Realizing that fatigue is another element about what our capacity is day to day. And if that's a day where we're fatigued, or if it's a week or more where we're kind of wiped out because we've gotten other things that we've had to address with life or an illness or an injury, those all impact our capacity and our limits. So the role of recovery is really fundamental to being able to continue to move and be active and stay healthy, where when we're pushing ourselves and we're asking our bodies to adapt, we need recovery from those activities and periods to have the body regenerate and to the muscles to adapt and actually get stronger. Heart and lungs, the same thing. So, in today's world, there's a lot of technology out there that for people that are techies and really like to be up on all the best of things like the HRV stands for heart rate variability. And part of what those devices can do is give us feedback about, well, how much in a recovery mode is our bodies, and are we really ready for another hard day, whether it's a hard day of working around the house, or we're going for another long hike again because somebody called us up and, hey, there's the opportunity to hike the Franconia Ridge or something. So they can be really helpful devices, but just keep in mind that if we're fatigued, then we can start to get ourselves run down. And by pushing ourselves, we do need those recovery times. And it's really helpful just to be mindful that to build lasting strength, it's taking 3 or 4 months. If we're not in our optimal health, sometimes it can take a longer time. So it's always interesting to me in the clinic, sometimes people who are recovering from an injury or something like that, and they are saying, well, gosh, it used to be nothing for me to run 6 miles. And I said, well, that's great. So when was the last time that you ran 6 miles? Well, that was, let's see, it was 8 years ago. So my point is that we oftentimes in our heads remember what seems like yesterday that we were able to perform certain things. But in fact, if we had built up over time the strength and resilience to do certain activities, if we haven't done those for some time, well, our bodies have adapted to that lack of stimulation and exercise, and it's going to take time to build that back up. And as we get older, it takes longer than it does when we were maybe in high school and thought, wow, if we went out in preseason, 4 weeks ahead of the season, we'd probably be ready to go. Well, that's not quite the case now. So as far as exercises go, I wanted to take this time to just talk a little bit more about the specific choices that people may have and what are some of the aspects of those. Because again, it's very common to have people ask, well, what's the very best exercise for me? And there is not one very best exercise for everybody. And in fact, a variety of activity and exercise has a real benefit to it because we use our bodies in different ways and with different amounts of motion and range of motion and flexibility. And as that slide about adaptive change, if we're doing a variety of things, then our bodies will have the ability to maintain a variety of flexibility and joint motion and those things that keep us healthy. Where if we are really dedicated to one movement, one activity, like one of the clients I have has said, somebody who is in their 40s, but until just the last few years would run every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and as a jogger and a runner. And that's one activity and one motion that is very selective. And it will strengthen certain muscles, but not highly strengthen others. And it allows other tissues to adapt and get shorter. And so it is not the only activity that is able to maintain all of the things that would be really healthy for us. So the upper left-hand picture is a group of people doing Tai Chi, which is an activity that has many tremendous benefits to it, where you can just see in this picture, they're already partially bent on one leg. And when we talk about some activities where people don't bend or squat or anything, that's a movement that we typically want to use and have for all of our life, getting out of a chair, going up and down stairs. And movements like Tai Chi actually require us bending and moving our lower extremities in a way that helps to maintain that. It's also a very flowing movement. So it's not rapid or jerking in the sense that there's a lot of safety to that element of it, but it also requires balance and coordination that is a real positive element to that particular exercise. So the one on the right is swimming. People often feel, well, swimming must be one of the best exercises, right? Because it's easy on my joints. And that is, in fact, one of the best aspects of swimming is that it's not a loading exercise for people that might have some arthritic conditions that won't tolerate a lot of weight bearing into their back or their hip or whatever. It often does require, people usually are swimming the freestyle or the backstroke, so it requires a lot of motion through the shoulders. And that is an area that can get irritated if that's the main thing you do and you do a lot of it. So it's a matter of being aware of that, but it has its pros and cons with that. Lower left, cross-country skiing is, it's a great exercise as well, from the standpoint that it really works our heart and lungs a lot, but it also has the ability to challenge the strength in our lower extremities and our upper extremities with pulling. So it depends on the intensity of what you choose to go out doing, if it's relatively flat, or does it start to have more hills in it. One of the women I had a pleasure of working with just the past few months as somebody this winter that was out cross country skiing. This is a person in their later 60s who's out for 4 hours climbing, up 33,000 feet of elevation stuff, some pretty serious cross country skiing things. So that can be done on a wide variety of intensities, but has a lot of different benefits to it that way. Lower right, golf, as I mentioned, is it can be a wonderful sport for life. If you can get out and walk enough, now that we have to use carts most of the way, but getting out and walking is a great part of things. But as you can see from the golf swing, there is a lot of coordinated movement and a lot of dynamic movement there that requires rapid change and rotation through the torso and hips. So having those motions available is really helpful to be able to do the work correctly, do the swing correctly, but also enjoy yourself and minimize your risk. And so we have one of the experts on our own clinic that understands all the dynamics about golf swings and how to optimize your ability to move with those and address limitations in mobility and strength. But again, that's something that you would really like to be able to get yourself in shape for, with some beginnings of some dynamic movement so your body can adapt to the change before the season comes around, where you go out. And a group of gentlemen that I know that every year they go down south in, I think it's March or February, and start off with 36 holes of golf. And that's a real challenge on the body. And we've had the pleasure of seeing them back in the clinic sometimes, because it was a little bit more of an overload than what their body can handle. All right, so very popular sport in the upper left. And it's one of the fastest growing sports here in the United States these days. Again, you can see this kind of motion requires the ability to kind of squat part way, rotate through the torso, move your arms. So if you enjoy doing those things, then you might really want to do some exercise work that really involves those kind of movements in a way to get ready for the season. Or if it's just ensuring that you're doing some activity that allows you to incorporate maintaining the flexibility that your joints need and your muscles need in order to reach and bend and twist to do those things. Cycling is really big in the Upper Valley, and I know it's some really very serious cyclists in Eastman. And so it has the benefit of being easier on the joints compared to like running or tennis sometimes, things like that. And you can really get a lot of intensity of workload through your legs and the heart and lungs. And in today's world with the electronic bikes, if you're, because we don't have a lot of flat terrain around here, electronic bikes sometimes can allow people to continue to cycle for longer periods through their life than they could without them. The lower left, weight training. As I mentioned, that for many of us, we really need to do something that stimulates enough resistance to help build back some strength that we've lost. And so I put myself in that category with a few selected things that are important to me. But you can get resistance through other ways that don't have to be through weights, but they can be particularly helpful to target certain areas that individuals need. So lower right is yoga, and yoga is a framework. When I think about yoga in the sense of the exercise aspect of it, not the meditation part of it, but that certainly has its own benefits. But the exercise part of things can be really excellent in yoga from the standpoint that it is a framework that can allow us to work on maintaining or actually increasing some of our joint motions through our hips, shoulders, things that our spine that we might lose if we don't otherwise challenge ourselves, but also the flexibility in our muscles. One of the things that people may not often think about with yoga is strength. And again, being the framework, there are a variety of poses, a variety of flows that can challenge the best of people, and you will come away sweating bullets. So again, it's a framework, and you would want to do what's appropriate for you, but has tremendous benefits. So there is a routine that I do probably 4 days a week or so, that it may only be 20 minutes or 20 or 25 minutes at the most, but it's a way that I feel really much better getting my day started by being loose and flexible. Hiking, walking, and I think that I like to make sure that people understand that walking it's an excellent exercise for us, and hiking is certainly has more stimulus to the rest of our bodies, but it's a great way to stay healthy. It's a great way also to stay mentally healthy, I believe. That idea that whether it's walking or people jogging, it's, I solve the problems of the world when I'm out going for a walk. And I would say, if that's your case, the things you think about are actually problem solving, that's a very positive additional element. And then the opposite is that if when you go out and you're walking, you just find yourself ruminating on what's not going right or your problems, then I'd strongly suggest you just really intentionally look around you as you go. And if you can walk in the beauty of the nature around here, and actually just paying attention to each different thing that you have a chance to see or hear, whether it's the birds, the stream, oh, I didn't notice that bush over there, the things like that, that gets you outside of your head. And it's a very positive part of the psycho-emotional things that we can achieve through walking and through hiking, as long as we're really aware of those options. Tennis, again, it's many people that we see are still playing tennis in their 70s, some people in their 80s. So it's very exciting about that. It just requires a lot of mobility through our joints, flexibility and strength, not over our legs and spine, but also shoulders and strength through there. So to be able to continue with these things sometimes just requires attention to maintain the abilities with these particular areas, and also to really ensure that we're getting ourselves in shape if it's going to be a summer tennis season, for example, to really be ready to do that. Lower right, things that relate to the elliptical machines, they're reduce the loading in the sense of the concussive pounding on our joints, on our back, hips, knees, and ankles that you would get if you were running or jogging, that we don't always, all of us don't tolerate. So there are some benefits to things like an elliptical machine that way, or cycling. And the picture on the left is certainly because you don't have to go to the gym to be active and to be maintaining strength that you might find to be a really rich part of your life, whether it's caring for the hay for the horses, or whatever it might be. If it's working around the home that gives you great satisfaction. The challenge with some of us around here is that with our change of seasons being rapid, it feels like sometimes you got to rake all the leaves up in 1 or 2 days, or on the same thing, getting ready for spring. And the challenge where we really need to spread out some of the activity enough and have enough adequate recovery so that we don't overstrain, overuse things where we have a breakdown in some of the tissue and develop the tendonitis, bursitis kinds of problems, or setting off arthritic conditions that we have, that having arthritis by itself doesn't always have to be painful, but if we set it off, then it's like it needs to be addressed. So in closing, I'd like to just mention that seeking out activities which you find some enjoyment, something that you are drawn to, I think is a very important aspect of what do you do for an activity. My father was an avid runner and would run every day, including through the winter in the dark. And I remember asking him one time, why do you run every day? And his answer was, well, because I'm afraid someday will come that I can't run. And sure enough, that day came. So having something that's really a positive mindset about what you're doing, I think, is really helpful. A variety of what we choose to do with our bodies is really healthy and helpful, and using different tissues in different ways and maintaining our health, as opposed to just, I jog, that's what I do that, most every day. It's kind of limiting and loads very selective areas of our bodies. And remembering that following prolonged illness or injury, we need time to work back and intentionally work back to get back to our baseline. Otherwise, without knowing, we end up being kind of short on where we are. And then as we age, things will tend to drop off a little more quickly than we might think. And the last one is, seek professional help when needed. People come to our clinic and sometimes seem apologetic that they have to come back in because they tweaked something or they irritated something. And I'll just say that just like an automobile that can run really well for many years, it just takes attention for us to be providing the kind of care for things when they get irritated or upset, or things that happen in life that were not expected or didn't go as expected, to just get things straightened out and back on track. So to the extent we can do it ourselves, we should. And to the extent that we might need a helping hand just to get back on track, keep that under consideration. So with that, I'm finished with that. I'm delighted to take any questions that you may have. And Paul, whatever you got there.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Excellent. So I have a few questions here. You made a good point, a good argument of our loss of capacity for physical activity as we age. I really was impressed with your talk test chart. And is there some way that you could recommend incorporating that kind of information into primary care? So, we could go to primary care appointments and, well, you should exercise more. And that's often the extent of that conversation. Do you have a vision of how that might be improved?
Well, as far as our profession, the American Physical Therapy Association has continues to actively make efforts to encourage and support that people might actually see their physical therapist that they develop a relationship with on a regular basis, in the sense of whether it's yearly or something, to check in on how things are going and what could be addressed that the individual might want each year. So there's talk and discussion out there about that, and I think that many people intellectually see some value with that. I think we're a little challenged by the direction we're going with our healthcare systems right now, and how to provide healthcare in our country, which at the moment, it appears that it is really in developing these larger and larger systems, and the systems are interested in creating larger geographical areas that they cover, whether it's Harvard Pilgrim and the Cleveland Clinic or Dartmouth. I think their attempts are noble in the sense of trying to improve population health, and yet it's a challenge to make inroads on large systems like that. So I don't have the easy answer, with the exception that we certainly, as individuals of clients, talking to your primary care physician about that, that you'd be interested to do that. I think they generally are supportive, but our challenge, I personally think primary care physicians are the key to our more success in our healthcare, and it's hard to find them, and it's hard for them. They have a challenging job, and they're not reimbursed as well. So the primary care question itself is a real challenging one. So a long-winded response for that, without a very clear answer, except for I really value the thought.
All right, thank you. Another question. Is weight loss a marker of sufficient or vigorous movement?
Is it a mark of adequate movement? Is that the
question? I mean,
Paul?
is it something that, I go back to the talk test, which is easily measured. But if I took up tennis, for example, should I be taking it up to the point where if I'm losing weight and I know that it's vigorous, I've reached an appropriate level for my needs?
Oh yeah, no, I think I understand the question. So it's a great question. In our country, obviously, we really have a weight problem in our country, and there are a couple elements I think that are related to that. Sometimes it's easy to think about, like, hey, are you getting the amount of activity that burns off enough calories, like calories in, calories out? How much are you burning and how much are you putting in? And well, I think that certainly there's an element to that about, are you getting enough physical activity to burn off the calories? There are other things that are a little bit more complicated with that includes, what kind of foods do you eat? An example for me personally was one where I unexpectedly found my blood sugar to be a little bit elevated when I went in to see my physician, 10 years ago or whatever. And I was not overweight. I exercised regularly, all the kind of things that would typically keep that under control. And I said, well, I'm going to be modifying my diet. And so I ended up modifying my diet, but continue with the same activity level. I ended up losing, maybe 25 pounds, which I didn't think I knew I'd gained a little bit of weight, but I didn't know I gained that much weight. And it was not because of the activity, it was because of what I ate. And it wasn't even how much I reduced just what I ate, but the kind of things I ate. So there's that element with it. And then there's also the element that regulating our body is done through the nervous system that regulates hormones and things like that, which is related to how much fat burn there is and things like that. And a whole new area that we are moving into that relates a little bit to the heart rate variability information that's coming out, and that equipment that we have called the Newbie relates in part to how does our nervous system regulate things. And so there are some people, I saw the Boston Marathon this year because one of our daughters was running in it. And it surprised me to see some people who are running relatively fast that were not necessarily slender and light. Some people were on the robust side. But I think that would be an example where, it's part of what is going on with their body and how it's regulating itself that relates to the weight. So the weight by itself doesn't give you the clear fact, are you getting enough activity or not?
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Dick has a question asking if lake kayaking is a good form of exercise.
Kayaking?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a picture I should have had up there, especially for Eastman. Kayaking is it's a great activity. It's going to be primarily using your torso, your core muscles, when we think about that, and the shoulders. So if you're out there meandering on the quiet lake, it may be very meditative and give you some very positive elements of the psycho-emotional part of things that way. But you can push yourself. And if you're pushing yourself, whether it's just because you're out there to push yourself on the lake or because you're kayaking in a river, there can be just increasing demands of how challenging it can be. So you can make it as challenging as you want with that. And you do need to be aware that it does require and benefit good mobility through the shoulders and shoulder strength. So, because we don't do that in the winter around here, it'd be great if you're thinking about, I really love to do that. I'd like to go for some long journeys on it to get your shoulders in shape before the season comes.
Okay. We have time for, I guess, for one more, or maybe another one will come up. But one thing that I didn't hear about was the impact of sleep on recovery and attaining good levels of physical activity.
Yeah, that's a really important area, Paul, and it falls under the category that I kind of alluded to and didn't get into depth on in this presentation, but that getting a good night's sleep, a restorative, that's restorative powers of sleep, and very important for us in maintaining our health and our recovery for physical activity. So a good night's sleep, restorative sleep, oftentimes it'll be interfered with if you're having pain, if you're experiencing anxiety about things, you're ruminating about things that just haven't been done, ticked off on your box, or a variety of things in that realm. And that's where it's my strong belief that our mental well-being is really the base of our physical well-being. So there are things with sleep hygiene. You can go on site on our website to read about things like that, that we have right outlined for all the things you can look at about how to get a good night's sleep, for some of the basic things with sleep hygiene, because it's really important part of our health. And I think I answered that one. So.
Okay. All right. Barbara has a question, expressing her pleasure that you spoke about nutrition and food choices, especially since there's so much commercial pressure through ads to choose salt, oil, sugar-filled prepared foods, and so on. She was glad to hear that the types of foods rather than the amounts were important in the mix. Do you have comments along those lines?
Probably not, from the standpoint it's not my area of expertise. I can just tell you from my personal experience, some of the things that were effective for me related to eating a more Mediterranean diet. And since you can tell with my last name, I'm half Italian in heritage, so it's something I enjoy doing. But having foods that had monounsaturated fatty acids in them with most any meal I ate was part of what seemed to be a helpful element for me in my health, and those have particular kinds of fats that I think we've been learning much more about what are important elements for people, and do know that each of us can be different, that it's not one thing works the same for everybody. But that's what was an important element for me.
All right, thank you. We have no further questions at this time.
I thought there was one from, I thought Dick had one more. I think the question related to whether it would be helpful to have a professional sort of evaluation to help you determine, whether you were at the right talk level and just to give you directions. I think that was the question.
Yeah, well, that's certainly what that's part of what our work is all about is, and at the end of the day, if we've really helped somebody, we've helped them because they're more independent and more certain about themselves in what they do to maintain their health, live their life on their own terms the way they wish. So I think that that's something that we do, even if it's indirectly with the people that come to us because they have a pain problem. At the end of the day, we're really trying to help educate and counsel them about what activities are might be most appropriate for them, or what precautions they might have of things to consider for them individually. So we do that on a regular basis.
Thank you. And I don't see any other questions, Paul?
I see none.
Okay. Well, I really want to thank Billy for this talk. It was very informative and gives us a lot to think about. And I really want to thank the people who came today, in spite of it being, 80 degrees and wanting to get out there. And some of us may be wanting to overkill or overload, I guess is the word, given all of a sudden the weather's good. So I really appreciate all your advice, and thank you again for coming. And as we said, it is being recorded, and thank you. Thank you all for attending.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy.